Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mentor Conclave 2021. It's a pleasure to introduce and welcome all our panelists as well as all our participants. Thank you so much for joining in, and on behalf of the Mentor magazine, the organizing team of the Conclave, as well as the Delhi Public School, Gurgaon, I'd like to welcome all of you. Mentor magazine has been for over 12 years now making an effort to add value to the education space. And the best way to do that is to work with the leadership in education. Every edition of Mentor brings out stories of practitioners, of leaders in the school education space who are doing some amazing work and sharing it with the schooling fraternity. We've been bestowed with a lot of love and a lot of adulation from all our readers over the years. Mentor magazine organizes the conclave once in 2 years to bring together the best practices of education. This year, like what's happening across the world, Mentor Conclave is also digital. And I'm very excited to start off with our first session this afternoon of the Mentor Conclave. The topic for our session today is Parent, the New Admission in Schools. And I'm extremely happy and honored to have our panelists with us. So let me start by introducing you to our panelists for the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to our leader of our host school, Delhi Public School, Sector 45 in Gurgaon, Madam Aditi Mishra. She's been an absolutely amazing and an illustrious education career which spans over 35 years. She's worked at several Delhi Public Schools. She's authored and ideated several books for children. Her hobbies and her interests include classical Indian music, classical dance, as well as reading. And she's been one of those passionate educators who's dedicated her life for making a difference to the space of schooling, education, and children. It's a pleasure to have Madam Aditi Mishra, who will also be moderating this particular session. So thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. Our second panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is another fabulous educator, ever smiling Manju Arif, the principal of the Delhi Public School, Bangalore North. A keen lifelong learner is what she describes herself, a technology enthusiast, and I'm sure this enthusiasm of hers has paid off very rich dividends in these lockdown days. And above all, she is still a very passionate teacher. And one thing of note about Manju and the work she does is she is very, very passionate about inclusive education. And DPS Bangalore North can be counted as one of those mainstream large population schools that very beautifully integrates students with special needs as a part of their regular schooling. So our panelist, Manju Arif, thank you so much for joining us. Our third panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is a parent, as well as she works with a consulting house, the PricewaterhouseCoopers, Associate Director. She's been with PwC for over 13 years, very passionate about mentoring young women in the workspace. So Nidhi would be bringing in that perspective of a working woman, parent from home, and how those challenges have impacted parenting, and very true to the topic that we have today, Parent, the New Admission in Schools. Our next panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is a passionate young teacher who's been a career counselor, a Teach for India fellow, a TEDx speaker. He's done his bachelor's in chemical engineering. By the way, Karthik, that makes the two of us. So we've got two chemical engineers, including me here. And he's got a master's degree in counseling psychology, moving on from chemical engineering to counseling psychology, and a passionate teacher. He believes that the universe is in an ever elastic motion, and therefore we must all dance. And I love that spirit and that note that you've given about your introduction. Karthik, such a pleasure to have you here with us. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, completing the panel, we have another parent who's an assistant director with Ernst& Young in Gurgaon. He's been an involved parent, and that's how he describes himself, with 15 plus years of corporate experience in business and technology and consulting with major multinational corporations. So that's our lineup of all our panelists. And I'm going to start off by requesting Madam Aditi Mishra to start off our panel. Ma'am is joining us all the way from very, very cold London. And that's the beauty. We've got Karthik sitting in a park in Gurgaon, and we are all in different parts. And that's the beauty of the digital world. So Aditi ma'am, take it over. Parent the new admission in schools.
Thank you so much, Sultan, for that wonderful introduction to the panel. Welcome all panelists and welcome all the viewers. When Sultan told me about the topics that he was thinking of for this 2-day conclave, I jumped at this one because this is something very, very close to my heart. I have always believed that in this lovely cosmic triangle of school education, the three most important stakeholders are the parent, the child, and the teacher. And sometimes when there is any difference or any concern, it is usually because one part of this cosmic triangle is out of the school. That is the parent. They've given us their child, so the child and the teacher are inside and the parent is outside. And I think most schools have been, for the past couple of years, been trying to bring in the parents into the school space so that they understand what's happening inside, so that they're part of what is happening, they feel involved. Now, that's been a bit of a dicey game because some parents have embraced this. They love coming to school at least 4, 5, 6 times in a year. Some have not liked it very much. Now, with the pandemic, the parent is willy-nilly part of the education system, because classrooms have moved from the brick and mortar of the school into the bedrooms, into the drawing rooms, into the study rooms of the house. How has this impacted all of us? And I'm very grateful to all three who are here today. My friend Manju, my parents, Swaroop and Nidhi, and of course, a dynamic, young, vibrant teacher, Karthik. So I'll throw this question to all 4 of you, in fact. And please try to be brief for this beginning, because then we are going to plunge into a deeper conversation. Your first thoughts for all 4 of you in March 2020, when the lockdown was announced, and what it must have meant to each one of you. I'll begin with you, Manju.
Thank you, Aditi. The first thought that struck me was, how do we start again? How do we start again with something that we've always resisted, specifically the teaching community? We did take up to technology, but we really never embraced it because we were wary about our position as teachers. And suddenly a lot of help came in from the IT community, and Zoom and Cisco and Microsoft, everybody wanted to come in. And then we had a problem about choice. Whom do we go with? And train teachers and get children on board, and how not to get into trouble with children who know technology better than us. So these are the thoughts that were running across in our minds, and I'm happy we all succeeded.
And I'll add to a little bit to that, Manju, when along with all your worries that you came up with, my third worry was also that now the parent is going to be part of the whole process. So are we ready for that? I mean, there's nothing we are hiding from the parent, and there's nothing that should be hidden from the parent. But are we actually ready to have a parent sitting with the child? Over to you, Nidhi, for your first thoughts.
Ma'am, the first thought which struck us was, how do we juggle all of this? We've got to look after the health of our families. We've got to manage the household, the work responsibilities, and on top of that, managing the school for our kids. So I think the role of the juggler is something that really comes to my mind. And that's how we really started off. So initial panic, fear, uncertainty around the pandemic, and having to manage these multiple responsibilities.
Wow. Okay. Mr. Bera, Swaroop, your first thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll just reflect on what Nidhi said. I think it was more of an emotional time rather than the mind was not working very logically, because we all were going through something which was first of its kind. So it was definitely schooling was one part of it, but to be very honest, everybody was completely baffled about everything going around, right? And over and above that, typically people, a lot of working parents specifically consider that 4 or 6 hours of schooling time to be something which they pass on the responsibility to the school and concentrate on their work. And that
Yeah.
mindset has completely changed because your work has not gone, it has just come online. So you are first adjusting yourself, and then you have to think about your young kids. So yeah, a lot of uncertainties, a lot of emotional, I would say a test of EQ at that point of time was something which is going at the time of March.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Swaroop. Karthik, as a teacher, the teacher perspective.
I think the first thought that I had was from a human perspective. Even before I could think from a teacher perspective, the first thought was just pure silence. I just felt like the whole world has been plunged into deep silence. And then came in the teacher perspective that, oh my God, I'm not going to see kids. I'm not going to see a classroom. I'm not going to see my colleagues. How are we going to function? And then, like the rest of the thoughts kick in. Curriculum, are we going to lag behind? How are we going to get across to the kids who really need us? And I think all of that sort of rushes in, and that sense of panic really rushes in. But the fact that everyone's in it together, that sort of also helps you find a steady calm. And I think that's what really was able to calm me down, that we will figure a way out even before technology kicked in, right, in full measure. So that's what I went through.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to all the four for completely different perspectives of the first thoughts. And if I may, before I move to Sultan, the first thought that hit me also was a little bit of panic, that now what? I mean, and we had these videos coming of people just dropping dead. And, immediately your mind goes that, is this what's going to happen to me? And as a human, you realize that you have no control over this. And that was also the time that I had this little epiphany that I can't control what's happening. I can't control the virus. I can't control the lockdown. Can I control how I respond to it? And I made a very conscious decision that I'm going to stay happy. I'm going to stay upbeat. I'm going to stay grateful. I'm going to stay optimistic. It was not easy. I must admit, to all the viewers, it was not easy. There were days of absolute gloom, especially because I lived alone in India. But I consciously moved out of it and I said, no, I have to stay upbeat. There are so many people looking up to me, that how will I respond to this? And that is what is going to be reflected from all the other stakeholders. Over to you, Sultan.
Yes, thanks for that. And so I'm choosing to answer that question for you. What is the first feeling? Now, when I look back, I still remember that fear that we all had. And I have this little 2-year-old at home. And then, we were told that, you need to keep your children and the elderly safe. So for the first time in over 20 years, I didn't travel for all those months. Otherwise, I normally travel 200 to 50 days a year. So that changed. But now when I look back, I think just the fact that all of us on this panel and, across the country, especially in India, I think we are healthy now. I think our doctors have figured out, how to handle this. And I think our doctors have experimented a lot more than the whole world put together. And that's what I figured, because I've gone through COVID myself, and both me and my wife, we went through COVID ourselves. And it's actually not that scary if it was diagnosed on time and if you had the right support. And for me, the support came from the Bangalore City Corporation. So the medicines that I had were from the government. So I have to place on record the fact that from that fear to the confidence that I have now, not just in I'm just saying about the country, I see a huge change coming in. But staying on the point, the parent is definitely a new admission and is in school now, right? In a lot of different ways. So let me start off by asking you, Aditi ma'am, a question. Now, I think it was you who brought out that point saying that, are we ready as schools to include the parent? Because me as a educator, but never run a school or been in the system, I've always believed in that triangle. Education is incomplete if you don't have the parent, student, and the educational institution, teachers put together. We've always had the parent's role was very superficial. It was signing off some records or informing, but now it can be a lot more integral. So how do you see that has changed, and what do you see remaining in the days to come? I mean, that's my question for you.
So that was, of course, another worry, that now we have the parenting and we have teachers who are not yet ready to handle technology. As Manju said, not all the teachers were ready for this. So I had all of 3 days to train myself and the teachers. And we plunged into it. Now, in my wisdom, I had thought that the lockdown is till the end of April. Don't ask me how I had calculated. I had no idea. But I had decided by the end of April, we'll be finally back in school.
I think you just calculated the year wrong. It was lockdown was still 20.
Yes, thank you for that one. But in those 3 days, we locked ourselves in our individual rooms in small groups. And then we had the one thing that I think I'm very positive about was that none of us was embarrassed by our lack of knowledge. So we involved our class 12 children, we involved some parents, we involved some teachers. Please help us. And then you would run into other rooms to make Zoom calls to each other or a Google Meet call to each other and see how it's going to work. And on the 23rd, I remember the day so well, we started the classes. And we started with trepidation. And before the classes could start, I sent out a message to the parents that we are starting online. We are taking baby steps. It won't be a 6-hour school. It is going to be a 1.5, 2-hour school. And should there be a problem, please do not make a fresh WhatsApp group and talk about the problem. Please tell me. I'll sort it out. And I think that worked, because I think one of the biggest challenges today is lack of communication and lack of understanding. But if you communicate a problem and intercept a problem before it can happen and hit you in the face, I think half the battle is won. And so there were some problems. Let me be very honest. There were some teachers who perhaps were not very adept at it. So there were some very polite mails coming in that, ma'am, you had said that write to us and this has happened. So please tell us what is the way forward. So without again going into panic mode, all we did was we shifted the class of the teacher for a couple of days. We gave her some breathing time and we gave those classes to a teacher who was more comfortable. Of course, with the very small children, the biggest problem is that for them, that teacher, whether she is good or bad or doing it right, she's the goddess. So having somebody else coming in as a intermediary goddess is not really acceptable. But it gave us those 2 days to breathe and reinvent that teacher. And she also took it up as a challenge. Now, going forward, I see this, what I have seen, frankly, I mean, maybe it sounds very utopian. There is a new respect between parents and teachers. Today, I see, and I have enough written evidence from parents telling me how good the teacher is, how she's handheld the child. When she noticed the child was very quiet, she kind of met him separately outside in a virtual platform. Likewise, the teachers praising the parents that, we were in trouble over this. We had to do a function and the dress wasn't ready, and how much pains the mother took to create a dress out of a sari. So that coming together of teacher and parent has sort of been solidified during this lockdown. And it is a byproduct of the lockdown, which we hadn't anticipated. I had known that teachers and children will become more tech savvy. I had hoped that parents will be able to appreciate teachers more, because I did mention to them that please remember the teacher also has a home. She also has a family. So she has to wake up at 4:30 to finish her household chores because there's no maid coming in, so that she can get into class at 8:30 or 9. So I think that growth in respect and trust has been the biggest takeaway. And I'm pretty sure that these things don't go away. So even when we restart school, whether it's a hybrid model, whether it's blended learning, whether it's full-fledged school, I think these memories of 2020 is going to make the way forward much more interesting, much more lively, and much more trusting. Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You said, I just want to make a point here, and I'm sure Swaroop and Nidhi would agree with me on this. For us in our workplaces, there's no option but to use technology very integrally. It's not a choice anymore. Even if you're looking at, filing returns to the government or booking travel, it's just a way of our life. And somehow I think Manju brought that out very beautifully. She said that something that we had resisted, I'm talking about the community of teachers. There's a good friend of mine who used to run a wonderful company. Somewhere they went very wrong. I'm not going to name the company, but they started the smart classes and the whole digital revolution in the country. And I remember one of the days when I was talking to him when the company was down and it was all out. So I asked him what happened. He said, the teacher killed us. And right. So this whole idea of adapting to technology, I think, was more from the school side, which is what you said. You were not embarrassed of saying that you didn't know to your teacher, to your students, and learning from them or from the tech world. Now, let me come to Manju and pick up a point that Aditi ma'am made. She said that we communicated, right? Now, Manju, I wanted you to let us know what has been your learning of communicating to the parents. How did you manage to get them on on the triangle? I wouldn't say your side or their side, but how did you manage to get them on board to collaborate, cooperate? Because without them, there was no way that you could teach. So talk us through your communication challenge that you've had in this pandemic and how that could remain relevant in future as well.
I'll just take from where Aditi spoke about trust and faith. Schools that run on trust and faith have always had open communication channels with the parental community, and the parental community has been very engaged in all our processes. So the pandemic was no different. So the minute we said this is happening and we will have to move school from the brick and mortar to the homes of teachers and homes of parents and children, they said, all right, tell us how we can chip in. And I said, be a part of us. Be a part teacher and a part student, and we'll all learn together. And I think for me and for my team at DPS Bangalore North, our biggest learning, and this is something that we always wanted, we never wanted schools to be confined in spaces within the walls of the school. We wanted learning to be seamless. We wanted learning for all stakeholders, parents, teachers, students, support staff. Everybody needs to learn in a space that's called a school. And this was happened. And when the classroom started online, I had a number of parents telling me, I wish we were in schools now. We could have learned so much better. There were parents who told me that we studied under a lantern light in remote Bihar. And we are so filled with gratitude for your teachers who are making learning so memorable for our children and for us as teachers. Communication became easier because people were communicating all the time. Parents were sending us messages in chat boxes when the classes were happening. WhatsApp messages started falling in, emails. People would just pick up a phone call and make a phone call, which they were not making because they would be, the school lines are forever busy. But now you could call a teacher anytime. So I think it brought us, and I'm sure I can see Karthik nodding his head, and Aditi and Nidhi, that communication channels actually opened up. And our understanding that we are family and we are in here together made a lot of difference. And parents chipped in to teach us, children chipped in to teach us, because children were actually digitally way ahead of us. So all of us said, let's learn together. And that was for us the biggest learning. Communication happened seamlessly. We never had a problem.
Manju, that reminds me of a fabulous, thinker, educator, Rudolf Steiner, who wrote whatever he wrote 100-odd years ago. And in his philosophy, which is now alive in the Waldorf schools, it's a very beautiful philosophy where you have the same teacher who teaches you from grade 1 to grade 10. So the teacher is the same, and they independently teach most of the subjects if you go to a hardcore Waldorf education system. And the philosophy is that the teacher and the child are learning together. So even the teacher doesn't know it. So she's moved to the next class now along with the students, and they are all co-learners in that philosophy. And I think it's just that it was so profound and so beautiful that it got lost in the mainstream education. But what you're saying is something like that is coming back, and probably Steiner would be very happy to know, thanks to the pandemic, that a part of his philosophy is coming through, because we're all learning, and it's going to be the same. I believe technology is not something that we will know. If you know something, there's something new coming in tomorrow, you will need to keep adding in. Nidhi, I'm going to come to you now and ask you a question, and you shared your fear of how you're going to juggle and how do you manage, right? Now, I want you to answer this question from your personal perspective, as well as from what you've seen from your parent circle, in your colleagues. Do you think that a working parent had the bandwidth to be a good play a good supportive role, or did it impact work, or you felt that it kind of impacted the whole schooling experience, and you felt that a non-working mom or father would have done a better job? So how did you look at this whole piece?
So, Sultan, I think it wasn't anything to do with a working parent or a non-working parent. Like Karthik also mentioned, we were all in this, and I think some of our organizations really supported us. They did understand that we are also playing the role of that part teacher over here. So the organization supported, the school supported, the communication channels like we were talking about. I think those really helped us. WhatsApp was always there with us. So the teachers kept reminding us of the various schedules, the emails that were coming in. And I think most importantly, our children are really, really smart. So maybe the first week or so, we had to handhold them to log into the classes. But after that, they were like, Mama, you can leave the room. I know how to do it. And that's an 8-year-old I'm talking about. So just imagine the teens, how they would have managed it much, much better.
Right, and well said, because even in my colleagues, and I've seen, because mine is a very little one to go to school, but I've seen my colleagues and their kids so beautifully managing this. Let me come to Karthik. And Karthik, I want to ask you this question, knowing and being very aware of the fact that your interest lies with children from other segments of the society as well, right? So while we the panel is predominantly middle and upper middle class, you've been exposed to a certain segment of our society which is not as privileged, if I can use that word, or is not as connected, if I can use that word. So what has been your observations, learning of how did education happen, and how was those parents supporting, in the juggi jhopdis and the the underprivileged society? How was that role of a parent, and how did you, what has been your experience on that front?
So I think someone in the chat box, put it very succinctly, the word disaster. Honestly, in the lower income groups, it has been a disaster. I'm not going to shy away from using that word. But at the same time, not all hope is lost. I am very much in connect with Teach for India alumni and the fellows who are still in the classrooms of government schools and low-income private schools. And it is heartwarming to see how they also moved to the tech space, because thanks to cheaper smartphones, thanks to a Reliance Jio SIM, children were on their smartphones. Children who anyways use WhatsApp to to keep in touch with me, to keep in touch with their class teachers, were now installing Zoom and other platforms on their phones. However, this is only applicable to those kids who had access to a phone. And furthermore, if you actually see the stories of those communities, it's extremely heartwarming. I know stories of kids who would find a way to go to their uncle's house in the lockdown because there's one phone in the family to log in for that one class, and say, Ki, I'm going to use your data. And then the whole family has to talk about, okay, this is more important. So let's save data for this kid. I mean, the kind of stories you hear, it's really mind blowing. So the ones who were able to make it through, they really put their heart and soul into it, and they managed. So even in a classroom of like 40, 50 kids that are, huddled into a classroom, only 10 were available online. But as far as I know, out of those 10 kids, they really studied because they were able to understand the importance of education. They were able to understand the importance of the classroom, and they would tell their teachers that, Didi, bhaiya, I'm really waiting for class to start again. So yes, the communities have been hit hard, but at the same time, they're coming back, and as schools come back, we're expecting more attendance, and we're expecting them to come back with full force. So there is a silver lining there.
Right. Thanks, Karthik, for that. And, from an education standpoint, what you brought out, we have to redefine the word infrastructure. Because infrastructure, even if you're looking at a government and governmental spending on schools or school managements, spending money on the infrastructure, I think that definition is changed. One of the things that schools would need to go back and redefine is that definition for themselves, right? And what it means to remain connected and different. And very beautifully you said, with a simple phone and a mobile connectivity, you can have a child being connected to the classroom, right? So let me bring Swaroop in, and Swaroop's been the patient listener so far, and yeah, he the intelligent parent. uh, do you think, what were the how did you get challenged? I'm purely talking from being that parent supporting the child in learning. What were those times when you felt that, how I wish schools was open, or, how I wish I could, so what were those challenging moments that you've heard or you faced yourself? I just want you to walk us through some of those, Swaroop, if you can.
Oh, sure. I'll take that example which Aditi madam mentioned, is about that triangle, right? Where there are three corners. And I'll not shy away from saying that, yeah, the two corners, right? Maybe the student and teacher in one plane, and the parent was always connected to teacher and students through the two sides, but was never on the same line. And the situation has pushed them to come into the same line. So you can only make a triangle a straight line by some pressure, right? You have to put some additional pressure in the top to make that triangle a straight line. So I'll not say that it was a easy sailing process. And yes, a few of us were fortunate that we have that kind of organizational culture where we work, where work from home was already a setup which was accepted, right? They also appreciate that, yes, you have to play that role of a parent going and attending those schools if you have a young kid. But yes, that was not the case everywhere. I would say that, like in any team formation, if I follow the typical model, you form a team, then you storm in a team, then you make the norms, and then you start performing, right? So I would say that first 2 months, I would not say it was an easy sailing even for parents, right? So if you're talking about any school or any class, if it's a ratio of 1 is to 20, 25 teacher-parent ratio, so if you're talking about X amount of teachers and their related problems, then you multiply that by 25, those many parents and those many challenges, right? So yeah, they were all coming into that Zoom meeting, showing their faces, but what's happening back their home in their organization, a lot of people have lost their job. A lot of people have resource issues, right? Even in middle classes, not everybody had 2 or 3 laptops at their home to spare, which one they can use in office, one for their kids, right? So it was that storming phase, right? Initial phase where people were questioning a lot of stuff. Even I'm not sure if I'm saying that a lot of parents had that concern of the ROI they're getting. Typically, in industries like education and healthcare, you didn't typically don't talk about ROI, right? Those are different type of industries. But there were some tough parents who were definitely coming and questioning that we are putting so much of effort, then what's the ROI we are getting? Should we pay less? Sorry for bringing that extra angle, but yeah, those are the things which initially we were talking, because people were, whenever in a tough situation, right, you start focusing on your own. It's like a same person going and taking a seat in a local train where he knows that one split second and I missed my seat, versus the same person going in a airplane where his seat is reserved. He can show best of his behavior in an airport, but the same person's behavior changes when you are in a local train, right? So it's resource versus the supply you have versus the demand you have, right? So it was tough for a lot of parents, because not all parents were in that same level. There were different challenges going on at home. Maybe for few of them, kids' education was not the highest priority. Few of them moving back to their hometown because they could not support, they lost their jobs. They may not have the right kind of infrastructure back home in a remote place, right? So those challenges were there, but that was only that storming phase of 2 months. But slowly, I think when people came back, maybe in the time frame of June, July, people, when they settled themselves on their part, right, where they have again maybe got back to their job, or they have sorted out the ways in their organizations at their home, then they slowly started empathizing about teachers and their life as well, right? Unfortunately, when you are in trouble, you shy away from thinking about what's opening around. And not everybody was fortunate. So when I'm talking this, I'm talking on behalf of parents. Maybe personally, my situation was quite okay, but it was more to represent those parents. So yeah, that storming phase was tough, and then we got a norming phase, right, where obviously people did appreciate each other's challenges, did develop that empathy, because they have got that back from their employers. Now they start thinking that yes, people around us who are helping us, who are helping our kids to learn, they would have also have their families. Still, they have come with a smiling face and manage those kids in a new environment, right? So that empathy may have grown, may have taken a month or two to grow. But I think after that, maybe after 3 or 4 months, I think then the performance started falling in place, right? I think all were gung-ho in right speed. And once you get that performance speed, I think it takes you much ahead of where you were, right? So just I don't know how many people follow stock markets, but in the March we saw the biggest dip ever in stock markets. But now, even though most of the organizations have not come back and got their revenue what they were getting before the pandemic, but the markets are 20-30% higher than the pre-pandemic, right? So that's the market sentiment which comes when you see positivity. I think exactly the same thing is happening in schools. Now people are in that one line after that pressure, and they see that positivity coming, and where they are now constructively willing to contribute to their overall education. So from that sentence which I started in the initial phase, passing on that responsibility for 6-7 hours and forget about it. Now people have started taking that responsibility, which I think is good for definitely the schools and even better for their own kids. So yeah, we have gone through a tough cycle, but the end output I feel is much more rewarding in a longer run.
Thank you, Swaroop. That's very well put, very analytical, I must say, true to your profession and your background. And thank you. It's very insightful. I'm picking up a very important perspective that you made, and I'm throwing this as a question to all the panelists to respond. There was a time when there was a pandemic and there was this panic happening, and then things have started getting to be normal. It is said that if a person who is addicted to smoking can leave smoking for 3 to 6 months, there are 99% chances or 90+% chances they will actually completely quit smoking. That means you need 3 or 6 months to build habits. It's not going to happen over a day, over a week, over a month, but 3 to 6 months. Our kids have not gone to schools for 9 months. Right? So now they're going to come back to school. What do you think is going to be the role of a school? And as a parent, how do you see that habit of, staying back or happy with the screen? Because it's a habit now. How do you see that panning in 2021 when things are going to open up and not be normal like 2019 was? But I think it's going to be a bridge year. Let me open this up and start with Manju. How do you think this habit of not going to school How are schools going to cope with it?
So Sultan, just before the event started, Aditi and I were talking, and we said in November, all the kids wanted to come back to school. They had enough of the pandemic, and 6 months was bad enough to stay at home with everybody crowding around, and they wanted to come back to their spaces in schools. And now when the exams are around the bend and we want them to come back and take the exams offline, kids are not very sure, because they have not taken an offline exam and they're wary. And we know with technology around, while we would want to believe that all kids are honest, but then there is always a little temptation. And so it has been easier taking exams online. But given the new session, I think kids will come back. But I also think that schools will have to rethink a lot about, timings that schools will function in, because kids they didn't have to travel. So the hours that they spent on buses hasn't been there. They would wake up late, they would stay up later in the night. And so if a school starts at 7:30 in the morning, it's going to be difficult. So we will have to rethink that. We will have to think of the number of hours that we keep them in school and the number of days. And my thinking is, if we've learned anything at all from the pandemic, we must have a blended hybrid model that says we should start schools with 3 days a week rather than start 6 days a week or 5 days a week. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for everybody. And I think we will have to rethink a lot of things when we come back to schools. But children are social beings. They want people. They want friends. They will want to come back to school, but not in an examination.
I like that hybrid model of having a few days and not necessarily a 5-6 day week. And Nidhi,
Or a full day.
Yes. It's literally like an astronaut or a cosmonaut coming down from space, and then you need to acclimatize and then become a normal person. So Nidhi, what are your thoughts? How do you see things changing from a child's habit point of view? And what's the role you see a parent, because anyways, a lot of kids, some of them didn't want to go to school. You had to push them at different ages, at different times in the year. How do you see that changing?
I think it's going to be, most of the kids definitely are looking forward to going back to school. They've not been used to sitting at home, not even going out to the playground. So they're all excited about going back to school. Also, like you said, forming the habits, the way we taught them that they need to wash their hands regularly, they need to use sanitizers, they need to make sure that they don't share food with others, even in the house. We stopped doing that. So those kind of habits have already been formed. These 9 months have given time to the parents to teach the children, and that open communication that we've had with our children also, we've been able to tell them that what really is the pandemic, what is happening out there in the world, why are they locked up at home, what's going to happen when they go out again. They've seen us, like even if we go to the bank now, we come back, we make sure we clean up, and we're careful every time we step out of the house. So that habit of being careful has already been formed. They understand that school is not just going to be for learning. I think they need that social interaction with their friends. That's very, very important for them. The travel time in the bus is something that we grown-ups probably feel is not too good, but the kids enjoy that time in the bus with their friends, the free play that they have during the travel time in the buses. So they are missing all of that, and they're certainly looking forward to going back to school now.
I'm not sure if Manju, you picked up an answer to your question in a comment that Nidhi made. So the kids want to come to school, but they don't want to do exams. So maybe there is a possible solution there. You have the learning happening in the school and the evaluation and the assessment happening online. I'm just putting it out there. So Karthik, what is your thoughts on this long-standing habit that they've been in these blankets snuggled up at home in this winter and getting back to school?
See, I'll first address the assessment comment. Pandemic or no pandemic, kids don't like exams. Let's be real, okay? that's the reality. I mean, I've been a student myself, and I'm a teacher now. It's the standard reality, and that's why assessments, the nature of assessments keeps changing. From an internal assessments to a group discussion to a classroom to a worksheet. Like it's like it's like if you can't convince them, confuse them, right? You're trying to get inside the child's psyche and just plan assessments in a way that it's holistic. So assessments is an ever ongoing journey, and frankly, that's why we have specialists in this field. But that's the nature of assessments, right? With regards to kids, I think what Miss Nidhi said was beautiful, right? Kids love their bus journeys, right? Like the younger kids, they love their antakshari on the bus, or looking forward to that bus friend. We as as older people, compared to the kids, they're older. So we as older people, we tend to optimize everything, right? Everything's about efficiency. Oh, it's wasted time, but not for kids. Not for kids. It's social interaction time. It's much needed bus time with bus friends. Kids who are not in the classroom, seniors, juniors, across the strata is literally in the bus. And furthermore, I think when it comes to the classroom, I think the challenges that we're going to face are, moving out of the inertia, as I think it's already been pointed out. It's the inertia of getting up earlier, getting ready again, putting on a uniform, things that honestly now after the pandemic seem redundant now that we have the online mode. It's still not redundant in a civil society where you're expected to show up to school in a uniform, right? That's not something that we're going to do away with. And furthermore, when before the pandemic, kids loved eating samosa off the same plate, chaat off the same plate, hugging each other, just being happy in each other's presence. Now, 2 meter distance, don't share your food. So there is this sort of social inertia that needs to be retrained, up at least until vaccination happens, which I do see is going to be a little tough for kids, because how children perceive that is different from what you and I can tell them. So it's going to be a little tough in terms of those aspects. But yes, mostly what we've seen is that children are dying to see each other. Most of the kids want to come back, and I think that's wonderful. And frankly speaking, from an attendance point of view, I think schools are going to see higher attendance because kids just want to get out. They really want to get out. They don't want to be at home anymore. They want to be with each other. And lastly, on the note of hybrid education, it's not only going to be about school timings, whether it's a full day or a half day. It's also going to be about some kids in the classroom and some kids at home, because we have to maintain that social distancing, and schools are already planning for it. And frankly, it's going to be hard on the teachers as well, because as of now, it was teaching from home. It was online teaching. And now moving to hybrid education is now a whole new set of tools. You have kids in front of you and you have kids on a Zoom call. So how do you manage the blackboard? How do you manage charts? How do you manage group tasks? It is going to be, a whole new challenge. But I think what unites the teachers and the kids and the parents is that the children want to be in school, and so do the teachers to meet them. And one way or the other, they'll find a way. They'll find a way to make hybrid education happen, just like how they found a way to make online education happen. So that's how I see this.
And Swaroop, what are your thoughts on this bridging between what's happened, as a habit now, and then how do you see kids going back? And what are the kind of changes parents or schools would need to make there?
Yeah, I'll pick up one comment from Dr. Ashish, which is the role of a school, and he highlighted to create interest. I think I'll stretch that and make it role of a school and a parent together. I will take it as stakeholders, is to create that interest, right? And let me move out a little bit and from that education space and just see around what changes, how right environment is bringing changes in our habits, right? So let me take an example of Uber, right? When they came, everybody thought that they're just giving discounts, so they will only last till the time they did is give discounts, heavy discounts, right? Even though it was cheaper than an auto at point of time. And everybody believed that once the discounts are gone, people will switch back to their own transport or maybe public transport. But that never happened, right? Uber is earning a lot, right? So they have just created an environment and right environment, and that changed everything. Similarly, if we talk about e-commerce, right? When Amazon or other players came, everybody was worried that all the small players will just fade away, right? But what exactly happened? The consumerism has grown up, right? Everybody today is spending more than what we were spending earlier, right? So why I gave these examples, not related directly to the schools, but these are great examples that if you create the right environment, right, you can change habits, right? So as Manju madam rightly mentioned, that you need to change your ways of thinking, right? Now you need to go to a hybrid kind of model. You can't just fall back on how we were doing. And as Karthik mentioned, that we have to see through those small things like sharing that samosa and those kind of things, which are the interesting things for kids, right? So if you do that, build that interest, exam is just a byproduct of it, right? People, then students will automatically fall back in that. So a suggestion for me to all the schools maybe is to follow what the other corporates do, is to hire a chief innovation officer, because somebody needs to just think through innovative stuff. You'd never know how the environment changes. Everybody used to think that for schools, never a drastic thing will change. It will be a slow, gradual change, unlike a lot of other industries, but we have witnessed it, right? So maybe a dedicated resource who can just think through all these nitty-gritties, who is away from the daily operations and just thinking on how to build that ecosystem where everybody can flourish. I think that would be a welcome change to see in schools.
I love that suggestion of having that innovation officer in schools. And I think it also calls for having some new roles to be defined, because change is going to be inevitable and a lot of things are going to be changing and schools need to. And I also believe that unlike large corporates who can afford these innovation officers, you don't need to have every school trying to reinvent the wheel. I think the Sahodayas as well as the ICSE the conglomerates and the governments can actually come up with some solutions and then share across the board. I'm kind of I was just hoping that Aditi ma'am joins in, because the larger chunk of the questions for this sessions were hers, and I'm really wondering to move on. So let me ask a question regarding Manju. Should there be a process with which a parent-teacher interaction can be more streamlined? Because in the pandemic, it just opened up the doors, right? So the parent was literally in the classroom through the digital medium. Should there be a defined process or a format in which a parent and teacher can digitally interact? Because before you mention that, can you also share some horror stories of parent interruptions that have happened in the classroom? So would you want to take that up, please?
The conversations are so intense and so interesting that I very often forget to unmute myself. My perception to a large extent has changed after hearing Mr. Bera this afternoon. And when he said, when it happened all of a sudden for all of us, whether it was parents or teachers. And if there were horror stories, they were all in the beginning. Whatever happened, whether it was a teacher not being adept for her class that morning, for not having prepared to answer questions of a parent who was a scientist, or to a parent who didn't realize that he or she was moving around in his undergarments. It's as horrific as that. We had both. But because we just were not used to the screen sharing us all the time. So people were learning. And I must say, it gave us time. And 1 year down the line, we are all much better. And the communication that teachers didn't have 24 hours. They had more work than that, because there were too many messages coming in. The platform's not working, the assignments couldn't be got. My child has a strain in the eyes, cannot see, cannot do so many classes per day, whatever. But all that has come down. And there is so much more understanding that parents and teachers have developed over the time. And teachers have resorted to creating WhatsApp groups with their with the parents. And during a class, if a parent wants to speak in also, the teachers are enabling breakout rooms where a particular teacher can come and meet the parent while she's assigned some work for the students. So it is falling in place. New guidelines for communication are being set up. I have spoken much more to parents other than the 3 PTMs that we've had. And I'm speaking to parents in groups of 20s and 40s. When I speak to parents, I say, parents, please do switch on your cameras and, unmute yourself, because I want to see faces. I don't want to be the only person speaking to a blank screen. And I can tell you, it has been so gratifying. I am so filled with gratitude for the support, the love and affection that has come for us from our parenting community or from my children. We had exams a couple of days ago, and I said, if you want online exams, we'll go ahead. But please help me create an exam-like environment at home for your children. And you won't believe it. Every house, however big or small, has created that quiet corner. And one parent has taken off to stay with the child and to monitor that the child doesn't resort to any other practice. This couldn't have happened in normal times, Sultan. I think COVID has taught us a lot about working together and talking, basically talking to each other.
Right. That's so wonderful to hear. Nidhi, let me ask you a simple parent question. How does discipline work in the, taking off from where Manju left, how does discipline work in this new, dual world that we're living in, the digital and the real world? Because, disciplining children had a certain format and a structure. You get up in the morning and go to school, period. There's no other, it was simpler because there was one format. Now that you see a dual format, and also some schools contemplating to allow children to come digitally to class, right? If schools have that facility. So how do you see the challenge of a parent and disciplining a child when it comes to education in the days ahead?
I think to start with, more than disciplining the child, it's going to be disciplining the parent first. We need to discipline ourselves, because children learn a lot of things from us. So when we start disciplining ourselves around forming a routine, doing things on time, doing some kind of activity, some physical activity, remaining fit, having healthy eating habits, I think they just start picking it up from there. So disciplining the parents probably comes first, and then it goes to the children. We need to discipline the child to become a little more self-organized and an independent learner. I think that's going to be the way it's going to be in future. You cannot depend just on the parent to teach you. You cannot depend just on the teacher to teach you. And as we move into these hybrid models, I think it's going to be the responsibility of the child himself to start learning some of these things. So becoming a little more independent as a student, I think that's something should be the focus of the teachers, the students, the school. That's something we need to start bringing in.
And I think that is going to be one of the key challenges for parenting in the days ahead. When this, hopefully this pandemic comes to an end and we come back to hopefully a normal world, I think there's a new definition for discipline that comes up. Manju, I have a comment that's been made, and I'm going to pick that up and drop it to you, saying that not all parents were, supportive. Not all parents were, it just sound, that I think you and even Aditi ma'am was just too generous with their praise of the parents. It was not always good. So from the parents, challenges that you faced may not be with, if you've not, but we've heard some horror stories on newspapers as well. So would you want to elaborate on that challenge which schools will continue to have?
Parents who are difficult, Sultan, have always been difficult. It's again, I see that the parent community that did not engage with schools earlier, who were not invested in their children's learning, or had unrealistic expectations of schools, continue to be the same. They can't change, right? Nothing. In fact, it's made it worse for them because they have their kids in their hands for 6 hours and they just don't know how to handle that. Right? All private schools have had problems with fees. While we did understand that, parents had lost their jobs, a lot of parents took it to their advantage as well. A number of parents just didn't want to pay the fees because online was not as good as offline. It was not the same as being in school. So why should we pay? And teachers have taken salary cuts. So, somewhere all of that does come in. But if I were to say that 95% of the parents were supportive, I think that says a lot. And for us, this is nothing new. And therefore, I would like to go with the 95% who've given their unstinted support.
So you do have a certain percentage, whether it's 1 or 5%, whatever, you have a certain percentage of parents who always have a challenge, who always challenge the school, and that will exist digitally or otherwise. Swaroop, let me come to you and throw a very controversial question, because you're the only one who brought that up. It was about the question of fees and, and the whole idea of fee reduction. In fact, state governments like my state in Karnataka has even announced very unilaterally, the minister announced a 30% reduction in fees, and in some states it's been different percentages. The Supreme Court has even come in and stayed a Rajasthan state government order. And, so how do you look at it, not just as a parent, but also if you look at it as an analyst from the outside, when you look at this industry, how do you read at this whole thing of service versus the fees kind of scenario that we've gotten ourselves in?
Sure. And I'll just request Manju ma'am, Karthik, and if Aditi ma'am would typing here. So to excuse me, I will just wear my consultant hat and don't judge me as a parent, right? So yeah, I think that's true. I think, as I mentioned in my earlier part as well, typically there are two industries. One is education and another one is medical field. These are two industries where typically people don't go very strongly with ROI, right? You go with any other service, right? I go to a restaurant, I use aeroplane or anything, any service I use, there is always an ROI which is there in my mind, right? Where whatever I'm investing and what I'm getting back. But a school and a medical field, and specifically for school, it's such a long investment, right? It's like around 12 years of investment, and then you expect something. You look for some dividends in between by the results and the awards and other recognitions they get. But end of the day, it's a long-term output, and that's why people don't look for immediate ROIs. But as I mentioned, that ROI thing, I think the fees thing, which Manju mentioned, and I think she also added that it has faded away a little bit right now, right? It's the initial reaction, right? And it was not limited to schools only, right? It was with every service you were having, because you are not sure about your stream of revenue, right? It's like if somebody had pushed me in the corner, then only I will think about falling, right? If I'm a plain ground, I will not think about falling ground, right? So everybody was cornered by the situation, even if people who were in industries where there was no job loss, but suddenly people were building that huge mountain in their mind that maybe tomorrow this can happen to me and I will lose. So let me save every penny wherever I can, right? And that reaction has resulted in those kind of harsh, and you have to give it that, yeah, when somebody is disturbed, you don't get the best out of them, right? So that pressure has created that question in many minds, that and earlier you were not putting that effort, now you're giving that extra effort, so expecting that to come out. I think that is not only with education. I think it very simple goes with a lot of households, right? When a lot of households have not called their maids for initial days, a lot of them have cut their salaries, a lot of them have paid their salaries, thinking that they are poor people, how would they manage, right? So somebody can take it as a business, somebody can take that as a long-term relationship building, right? So various people will have various viewpoints, right? And I'm so very happy to hear from Manju madam that it was only 5% tough parents, because if I go by statistics, any normal curve, there would be a certain percentage in either side, where you'll be very friendly parents where you will ask for 1 year advance, they will pay, and there would be very tough parents who will take advantage, right? And that middle 70% will just wait and watch what majority does, and they will follow, right? So that's true for any group, right? So that was heartening to hear that only 5% of the Manju, don't judge me. Even that 5% revenue cut would have been difficult for you, but I would say
I'm not at all, Swaroop, I'm not at all judging you. In fact, I was reminded, schools reflection of the culture we create.
Yeah.
Right. I can speak only for DPS Bangalore North, because that's where I live and I breathe, and that's our soul. And if I am talking about only 5 or 3 or 2% of my parents not being supportive, it's taken 20 years to build that culture. And they believe in us, they have trust in us, they have faith in us. And therefore, my numbers will not match with what statistics or analysts will have to say. I have a question coming up on the group chat as well. And this is what I said. So schools cease to be places of ROI. They're about human relationships.
Yep. No, I think that's
request...
exactly what I wanted to come to. Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, finish.
I was just trying to finish that. Yes, that was one part of it, that yes, it was just a tough situation and that was the immediate reaction. Let's not read too much into it. But having said that, yes, I think every industry should evolve. I would also encourage schools to think innovatively and try to keep this ROI thing also in mind, right? End of the day, it's an industry where, yes, you have to pay your teachers, the school buses and everything, right? End of the day, it's, even if it is a non-profit organization, still you have to manage your cost, right? And every industry is going through that margin pressure, and it is the right time and right example to set that, yes, we have to start thinking how to bring innovative ways to bring more revenue, right? So yeah, so the only way out is to give more value, right? So whatever you're giving, you have to continuously be on your toe to think that how we can bring more value to, and even though it's an industry which is fortunate enough not to think that way, but still consider the students and parents maybe as a customers, right? And also think through that that question of ROI may come tomorrow in this industry as well. So it is better to be prepared than to be sorry. And one of the best ways, as Manju Madam mentioned, is the relationship. And the other aspect which I will stress is continuously think how you are adding more value to your stakeholders.
Sure. Thank you for that. And before I move on, I'm going to request the audience if you have any questions, because I definitely need help. Because Aditi ma'am was, co-moderating, and she had most of the questions with her. So I'm just being very impromptu. Let me move on. And I picked up a very interesting point from Swaroop. And Swaroop, what I've known is Manju is absolutely right, because she's that passionate educator. And the challenge that I've seen with a lot of middle class, upper middle class schools in this country is the management and the educator think very differently. The educator thinks education, the management thinks money. And a lot of challenges within a school comes, we can keep that for another discussion, because it's going to be a longish one. There's a huge, challenge with the way the mindsets are, and the way with the way the think itself is very different. The management does think, like you mentioned, ROIs and all of that. And whereas the educators who normally front end the educational institutions, they don't. So coming to you, Karthik, I just want to bring you in here and, ask you a very simple one, which is one of the questions actually also on our, Sharon has a lovely question. What was the question about how can you define a process of how do you engage? Please define support by parents. It all comes down to saying, if you're going to support the school, then pay the fees. So that's one part of it. But how do you define support of a parent? Because parents have always paid fees. It's nothing new at all, right? So parents paying in fees, interim. But how do you see the whole dynamic of a parent getting more involved in school? And what should be the support a parent should be giving? And Nidhi, I would ask you the same question from a parental point of view. What are you seeing schools gearing up to providing more information, more support for a parent?
So, ever since we've entered this pandemic and we've entered this online mode of teaching, what is the most basic thing that has happened? A child is no longer under the purview of a teacher. A child is no longer with their friends. A child is not subjected to the group energy of a class, which is extremely important. When you have, let's say a teacher is doing something on the board, right? And a child is probably tired, or is not, wanting to pay attention, or, is wanting to scribble on the table. There is a certain group energy, which is either a sense of competition with a partner, or a sense of fun that the teacher has instilled in the classroom. There are more ways than one in which a teacher is also trained, in terms of behavior management, and in terms of classroom management. A teacher is trained to see, even without turning back, who is working, who's not. who is interested, who is not. Now, in this current age, support is basically enabling all of those things that the online mode has disabled for the teacher. So that is how I see support. Now, because of a variety of reasons, primarily because of empathy, if a child does not want to turn on their camera, it's all right. We understand as teachers that a child might be sick. A child is probably trying to, help their parents with data, bandwidth issues. A parent is working in the other room while a child is in school. It's a Wi-Fi burden. It could be a health burden. It could be a bunch of burdens. It could be the fact that, they're all sharing the same space and the child, is shy, does not want to show what's in the background. So we understand that, okay, they need to be on mute. The video needs to be on mute and the audio by default is on mute. But at the same time, if a child starts wandering, if a child is disinterested, if he or she is not getting with the program, that group energy is missing. That sense of comfort of asking a friend, I didn't understand what happened on the board. Can you quickly tell me before I get asked? The smallest of things, right? That is where we need support. That's why now, if you notice, in terms of, I think we touched upon communication also at some point, where in the beginning of the pandemic, there was to and fro crazy communication happening. Now communication is a bit more structured. First, we got mails from parents saying that, they're feeling overburdened, that, every subject teacher is writing a separate mail, right? From the class teacher, subject teacher to the, to the principal. So now it's more structured, right? It's more structured. It goes through the class teacher. Parents understand that they need to not only check their office mails, they also need to check that, mails from the school saying that, okay, this subject is fine, this isn't. Parents need to be more proactive. Back when, we were studying, parents only met the teachers once in 3 months, once a quarter, or twice a year at a PTM. Bachcha acha kar raha hai, bachcha acha nahi kar raha hai. It's a report card. Okay, fine. Academics, beyond academics, 10-minute meeting, in and out, right? Now it's at least 10 minutes every day, right? It is understanding that, hey, your child hasn't turned on the video camera for a bunch of days now. Is everything okay at home? Is this child paying attention? If the marks seem fine, they'll be like, okay, this child is able to study. We won't push this child too much. But beyond marks, in other sorts of, let's say, collaborative activities, tasks, whether it's, an online quiz, whether it's an online debate, where, again, if we see some sort of disinterestedness, a teacher tends to check in with the parent, right? Hey, is everything okay? Is your child doing fine? There's this activity happening. We reached out to your child, but there was no response. So is everything good, right? So that's what support is. Constant communication, constant response. Because, talking to a child and their projects and their classroom, they are not like Amazon delivery. We can't take 3 to 7 days for, someone to reply and tell us, oh, your order will come. No, we need it within, 24 to 48 hours. And it's the same from the teacher's side as well. If a parent checks in with us and says, hey, that college application hasn't been sent, or hey, there's an international online competition, we received the mail, but we're unable to figure out. Teachers are constantly on the go, and we expect the same from parents. That is the support that we need in the classroom.
Very well said, Karthik. I think the support that is real, that enhances, and it's like literally the teacher is not with the child, but can the parent fill up those small pieces there? And very beautifully put. Thank you, Nidhi. From the parent side, what's the kind of support that you would be looking for in the digital space when learning is going to be hybrid in future? And Manju, I'm going to come to you after this.
So I think the last year has made learning a lot more holistic for a lot of kids, because it's not just been the teachers who've been teaching them. The siblings have pitched in, parents have come in, grandparents have come in. So it's become a lot more holistic. But having said that, I think parents are not trained teachers, that's for sure. While we do say parents are the child's first teacher, but I think as far as formal schooling goes, it's been left to the school by a lot of parents. You know, when they start formal school, a lot of us, we pass on that responsibility to the school to take care of the routine, to take care of the learning part of it. So the support that we would require as parents from the school would be just to teach us parents, you know, how to help you teach our kids. That's probably going to be the support. Teach us how we can help you support and teach the kids. That's probably something which I see is going to be required by a lot of parents.
Said, thank you. I was on mute. So, I mean, that's so true that, in a lot of schools, in a lot of cases, at least I've seen where schools have piled on a lot of, after video work. That's what a parent called me. वो अपना वीडियो चला देते हैं तो एक घंटा के लिए, उसके बाद there's a lot of assignments that I have to sit and do. So I've seen that, and I think a hand-holding of parents. I think it also calls for all of, because there are a lot of school leaders on this particular call today, on this particular live chat. Most of them are school leaders. I think it calls for a proper parent-teacher, school-parent engagement, a slight more formality brought in there, so that there are some rules, some do's, don'ts that come in over there. Let me move to Manju. In all of this space, the children of special needs, right? They're a different world, and that's a world that you understand really well. How has it shaped up for them, and how did this whole digital and home schooling from home, because you can't call it homeschooling, how did it impact the learning of the children who are, specially abled? How can you share your experience on that, and how can schools enhance that going forward?
Sultan, I'm again going to take from where Nidhi stopped, and she said if parents can be hand-holded, and if they can be, taught how to, transact curriculum. I won't use the word teach, because none of us are teaching. We're all learning. So I think this is what worked for us with our children with special needs. For children with special needs, the pandemic, when it started, was hugely disruptive. It was most disruptive for them because they work with schedules. They have fixed schedules, and that's what they're most comfortable with. And when that routine is broken, they don't get onto the bus at the right time, they're not in the class, or they don't go back home, there are meltdowns. And that's when our teachers, our special educators came in. And these kids cannot have too much of screen time as well. So the teachers started training the parents. So the activities that we wanted the children to do in the confines of an apartment, using an old sari, because they didn't have the equipment we had in school. So if they had to have a trail made, it was a sari rolled into a rope, and some activity was done with it. Something was done with atta, and something was done with chane and rajma. So a number of activities that children could do for sensorial activities or others was something that the parents and the teachers were doing on Zoom. And the parent then was doing the live thing back with the child. For those kids who were slightly older and who had to come onto the class, being one-on-one with the teacher improved the results 50%. Learning outcomes in children with special needs improved 50%. And I was waiting to tell this to the audience, because yesterday when I was speaking to my special educator, she said kids were so comfortable working on that one screen without others, without being bullied, without being troubled, without having a cacophony of noise, noise around them, with the earphones on and the screen and the teacher as if she was just talking to you and not to the others. They felt heard, they felt wanted, and these children started communicating and participating in the classes much more than the others. And 50% is the average improvement in learning outcomes for these children, as told by my special educator. So it was a partnership, and not only with parents. Many of these children have the grandparents also with them. And we have grandmothers and grandfathers who engage, and they've had higher levels of patience with these children. and it has been phenomenal. This has been a success story.
That's so good to hear, Manju, because I always knew you were doing a great job. But what you've just said, I must insist that you publish, pick up more learnings, whether it's 50% or 40%, doesn't matter. But I can completely relate to the fact, away from the noise, away from the bullying, away from the prying eyes, this could be a great opportunity for almost all schools to, include digitally, at least. If you can't do it physically, all schools can today create a format with which they can include, if statistics are right, and if you ask me, what I think is, um, almost 8 to 10% children in some form or the other, don't uh, find it comfortable in a regular school, for whatever reasons, disability. We may use all kinds of words. So you're saying that digital could actually be a blessing in disguise for them, and thank you for sharing that. It's so wonderful to hear that, and I think that's one of the best things I've heard for a long time about the whole schooling from home and the digital piece. So let me go to Swaroop, and in terms of the hybrid, people keep talking about hybrid education, right? Where it's going to be a partly digital and partly. I'm also asking you to wear the role of both a consultant as well as a parent there. What do you think is the real mix? You've seen uh, physical school 100%. You've seen digital school 100%. You've managed to see that. What would you recommend? What do you think, if you were to wear a consultant hat and share it out there to the educators? What's a good mix?
Yeah, I think the entire industry is going towards personalization, right? Even gone are the days of customization with personalization. We all open YouTube and we all see different things based on our behaviors, right? So taking examples from those best of the businesses, that yes, I think what is necessary for education right now is that kind of personalization, as Manju ma'am rightly discussed about the specially abled kids, right? They're definitely in that domain, you require even more personalization because every special kid is very different from each other. Likewise, I think, yeah, every student is also very different, right? And if you follow that one jacket fits all, it may not give you the best output. And I'll take a clue from Nidhi as well from there, that first, for to bring that change, the first thing you need is to train the parents itself, right? Where the parents are not going back and fighting with school that my kid should have got half marks extra so that he could stood first, right? Those half marks would never take him anywhere, right? And honestly speaking, even that's a different topic altogether to discuss about formal education, because nowadays the knowledge is freely available all throughout, right? What you can actually build in a kid is the right value system. Just taking examples from you, Sultan and Karthik, right? You both are chemical engineers, not doing anything close to what you are, but you are doing extremely good in what you're doing right now, right? So those 4 years of engineering may or may not have directly helped you, but what would have helped you, the dedication you would have shown in those time, which is paying off, and that habit of dedication towards what you like has pulled you where you are, right? So to build that value system in the kids, so that and that should be very personalized. If somebody is passionate about sports, give them the right balance that they can put that effort in sports and manage, because India is also moving away from that kind of setup where education is the, in the sense, scoring 90% is the only way, which was the case when we were growing up. Right now every field gives you a decent good opportunity, and specifically addressing to this group where most of the kids at least would have that parental support that they need not earn in an early age, right? Right. Unlike a lot of unprivileged kids, I'm not considering that mass. That's a different story altogether, right? So yeah, I think if to bring that change, definitely the schools have to start thinking about this personalization, and for that, definitely the first thing which is required is to train the parents what should they expect out of the school, because if the school is going in one way to build up a right value system in the children, and back home everybody, the parents are fighting for that half marks, the kids would be absolutely confused. They will not go anywhere, right? They will get two different tones when they're spending 8 hours at school and rest 10, 12 hours with their parents. So unless they're in sync, you will not build right kids. And believe me, anything which can be done in IQ in next 20 years when our kids will grow up will be done by machines. So you don't require high IQ people with 99% marks. They're not going anywhere. Machines will just pick their job. It's going to be your value system and EQ which will take you to the next level. And for that, that requires a very tight partnership between parents and teachers to build that ecosystem.
Completely agree with you, because academics, grades has outlived its time. I think it's our generation benefited from it. Let's accept it. Our generation did, but for the little ones who are now in school, for them, they're going to live in a world where whether it's information or any of the IQ related stuff, which Swaroop pointed out, it is said that even lawyers' job in future is at risk, and a lot of the others, that's what you keep hearing. But what's not going to be out of fashion is the good old being human. It's just the simple values, the simple things which are not taught. It's not a curriculum, but those are things that you pick up from home. It's a part of your tamiz, your tehzeeb, your culture. It's a part of your school culture. And I think those are things which digital will never replace. And Karthik also very beautifully mentioned, it's about the heart. It's about, where your communication needs to be much stronger with the children. So with this, I'm going to be winding up with my last comments from all the panelists. I want to leave you with one question, and I want a quick response. What's the one constructive role that you think a parent can play in future when it comes to education? Not something they've played in the past, but one constructive role you see parents should play in future. So I'm going to start with you, Nidhi, if you're ready.
I think the one constructive role that parents can now play is just being, just letting their children be, rather than straitjacketing them, putting them into a definite role. I think just let them be, give them like we said, the basic values, the basic culture, give that to them, but let them grow into individuals that they are born to grow. Let's not straitjacket them into something that we expect or we were expected to be into.
So beautifully said. Very well said. Swaroop?
Yeah, I think the one thing would be partnership. I'll just keep it in one word. Rather than bringing a hierarchy, that there's a hierarchy of teachers, hierarchy of students, and hierarchy of parents. I think if parents play the role of partners, both to the teachers and to the students in their own level, I think that is going to, the triangle which Aditi madam mentioned would be a smooth equilateral triangle in that case.
Beautiful. Karthik?
I think mine's quite simple. Don't limit education to textbooks or assignments. Education is, there's biology behind me in the birds, there's geography in the soil, there's physics in football. When you are able to instill that kind of curiosity and love for learning over, dinner table conversations, then everyone's job is done. You don't need that triangle. As sir said, the triangle goes kaput, and the child is just willing to learn from anywhere and everywhere, and the job is well done.
Sultan, you are on mute.
So I hope it's my turn, Sultan.
Yes, please. You have the last words for the session today, Manju.
And for me, it would be for parents to be role models as lifelong learners. They need to tell the children, they need to show to their children that they've unlearned, they've relearned, and they're going to continue to learn as long as they live this life.
And what better way to end this wonderful panel? Thank you so much. A big thank you to Aditi ma'am and to the Delhi Public School, Gurgaon. We unfortunately lost out because of technical issues, but we really, really missed you, Aditi ma'am. We would love to have some of your wise inputs and questions here. And Nidhi, Swaroop, Karthik, and Manju ma'am, thank you all so much for joining us and making this discussion very, very insightful, I must say. And I'm going to leave with a positive note, which I picked up from Manju. If there is a way that every school can start including the special needs children, digital is the way forward. And if you want to learn more, please do write to Manju. I'm sure you can reach out to her both on LinkedIn or Facebook, or just figure out Delhi Public School, Bangalore North. And Manju, please do share. I would love Mentor to publish an article about this learning, because the world needs to listen to this. So thank you all so much, and good luck to all of us as we move from pandemic to hopefully a normal world. And so thank you for joining us at the first session of Mentor Conclave 21. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.